Hello everyone. I want to talk a little bit about your final exam and what you can do to prepare for it. First of all, when is the final exam? And that will be on the 15th, Saturday the 15th, from 9 to 11 a.m. So our typical Saturday morning class time will be the time at which we have the final exam. We'll then talk about some logistics and preparations as well as you get ready for this final exam. So for the final exam, it is a comprehensive final exam, and I'm not going to list all of the course objectives here, but they're all of the ones from the syllabus. So everything will be assessed on the final. So it is comprehensive. And a bit later, we'll talk about what you can do to prepare for that, because I know that is a lot. So in terms of the logistics, the exam will become available at the regular time that we start class, so at 9 a.m., and then it will remain available until about 11:15. The exam itself will take 2 hours, so you have a little bit more time than you did for the other exams because it is comprehensive. And that's from when you open the exam until it's completed. One thing that's a little bit different on this exam compared to the others is that I am giving you kind of a shorter time frame there, just so that you are kind of getting it done, hopefully more towards the start of the class than towards the end. But there is a little bit of a buffer there in case you do get a late start or have some technology issues. And if something is coming up in the moment, you can email me and I can make sure that everything is available to you. And then you should be uploading your exam to Canvas during that time frame that you have to take the exam. So I want to say a little bit about the time issue here. Again, so it's 120 minutes. So that's more time than you had available for the first two exams because, again, there's more material here. And this has been something that some people in the first two exams have had a bit of difficulty with, I think, understanding that idea. Because, you look at the time of the class and some of you, I think in the past had assumed you had that full time. But it does say on the exam itself what the time limit is. It's saying that here as well. And also, as you take the exam, there's a timer there that you can watch. And the timer is saying, well, this is how much time you have left to complete it. So you can watch that as you're taking the exam. If you're not sure if you started and you just somehow forgot when you started, there's a timer within the exam itself that you can use to help with that. From the past times I've taught this class in this way, my understanding from students is it takes about 15 minutes to submit the exam in some cases. So you want to allow for that, and that's factored into the 120 minutes that you will be spending 15 of those minutes with the uploading process. So that would be either scanning or taking pictures, and then whatever you do to upload it. That would be part of the 120 minutes. So it's essentially more like 105 minutes in terms of the amount of time you would be spending on answering the questions themselves. So because of that, this exam is a little bit shorter than final exams have been in the past to allow for that extra time for the submission process. Also, I would ask that after you have turned your exam in, that you check in to make sure I got it okay before you kind of walk away for the day. So you could do this in a few ways. You can come on, so I'll have the Zoom open the whole time. You can come on to Zoom and ask me there, or you can send me an email. And I'm just going to check that on Canvas there is a submission, and that it is, the full pages. It's not just one page. Sometimes I've seen that happen in the past where only one page was turned in, and then I need to make sure to get in touch with that person to make sure that they are able to turn in the rest. So it's just to make sure that I received your exam and I received everything I needed for your exam before you kind of walk away for the day. Because once you've done that, if you find out 3 hours later, then you're not really able to turn it in for the full credit. You might get a 0 if you're not able to get that in on time. So make sure that you are checking in that I have gotten everything. Also, sometimes a lot of people are turning in at the same time. So this might take a little bit of time, but if you just kind of hang out on the Zoom for a bit, I will get to you as I can. And I can see as you're taking them how much time you have left, so I can be prepared for the point at which those get submitted, and it will tell me when you're done. So just again, make sure that you are keeping an eye on the time and that you are checking in before you walk away that everything did get submitted okay. A few things about what you'll be turning in. Please make sure that you have completed everything from the exam. That includes showing your work. So if there's a calculation problem, I need to see all of the steps to get to the final answer. And that's mainly so that we know that it is your work and not the work of Google, for example, finding something that might be similar to the answer. So you need to show your work to get full credit. What you don't need to do is you don't need to write out every question. So if you are not able to print and write on the document, it's okay for you to write number one, show your work for the answer to number one without writing the whole question out. That is okay. You don't have to write everything out other than your answer to the question. So don't feel like you have to copy those down if you do not have the ability to print and then upload from that. You should be uploading your exam to Canvas. Make sure that when you do that, it's either a PDF or a JPEG. I've received some other formats in the past that I can't open. If I can't open, then I can't grade it. So you want to make sure I'm able to grade your final exam. So a PDF or a JPEG. So a couple of options here. If you have the ability to print things, you can print it out and then fill in. So write your work out and then either scan it or take a picture, however is easiest for you. You can write on a separate page. So I mentioned this earlier. You can write out, if you're not able to print out, write out on a separate page, take a picture of that, submit that. Again, if you're doing that, you don't have to write out the questions. You can write just the answers, but again, making sure you are showing your work for those. When you are doing this, you will probably need to have multiple pages. This has not been a big issue this semester, but in the past there have been students who are not able to do multiple pages very easily. So please practice with that on the practice exams to make sure you know how to do it. You know how to upload multiple pages. So these are the things that I'm expecting in terms of what you're writing down to turn in for the exam. And then a few things I want to mention in terms of preparation. So on this final exam, you want to be doing a lot of work before the exam starts. That's the best way to do well on it. And because this is an open book, open note exam, that is where you're going to probably be doing most of the work, is getting ready ahead of time, getting your resources ready ahead of time so that you can easily find what you need. So I'm going to point out some of them here, but you might, as I'm talking about this, you might be thinking of other things as well. These are the kind of the ones that are absolutely essential that you have access to while you are taking this exam. You definitely need to have a periodic table. So there will be questions where it is assumed you have a periodic table available to answer those questions. This is in the front cover of your textbook, but if you have another source for a periodic table, that is fine as well. The solubility rules. So there will be questions where you might need to know what those are. So that's table 7.2 in your book. Heats of fusion and vaporization. So those are tables 12.2 and 12.3. You might need to access that information while you are taking the exam. What I would recommend for these kind of three sources is if you have a physical textbook, put like some kind of a tab or a marker or like a post-it note on those pages and like write on it, you know, periodic table or solubility rules, so that when you need it, you can just flip right open to the page that you want. If you have an ebook or something like that, if you have like a separate tab open on your computer for each one of those, that would probably be the best way to do that. But make sure you can kind of easily jump to those things when you need them. Whatever other things you need to know, so equations, there's certain constants, so those are on the back cover of your textbook. Make sure that those are bookmarked as well. So you will need to decide for yourself what are the things you will need to be looking up as you go, and then know how to look those up. So put a bookmark on those and be able to jump to those. One other thing that I would mention here would be your previous exams. And we'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. But have everything easily accessible so that when you need it, you can jump right to it in like 30 seconds or less, look up what you need, and then move on to the next question. What you don't want to be doing is learning it as you go, right? So you want to make sure you know it ahead of time so you can do well based on what you already know. And then, of course, you will need to have a calculator. Using, an internet calculator or your phone is fine in this context, but you will need to do that. Don't try to, do it by hand on the side of your paper. And then things you should not have access to, other people and internet sources. We'll talk about that a little bit here on this next slide. So as with the previous two exams, this will start with an honesty pledge that you are doing the work yourself. And by that, that would mean that you're not talking to another person, whether it's a classmate or someone from outside of the class, and you're not looking things up on the internet to find their answers. And part of this, this is basically so that you're showing that you know this information. One of the things I will mention is that on each of the first two exams and probably on the final as well, there are questions that are written the way they are to avoid the ability to look them up, to use Google to find them. There are questions where the Google answer is the wrong answer, and if you get that answer, that's telling me that you're basically looking it up on Google, and because of that, you should be getting a 0 on this. So make sure you are using your textbook as your reference. Everything you need is in your textbook. Google might have some of the things you need, but it will also have things that you absolutely do not need. And chemistry professors over the past year have been figuring out what the internet is telling you about chemistry. And we know when it tells you the wrong thing. And sometimes we put those questions on the final or on the exam just to make sure that you are doing it the right way. So just be aware of that. And just be aware of this expectation that you are doing the work yourself. And the reason for this is because you're taking this class, most of you, because you're going to be taking another class later. And if you get through this class with Google and you go in the fall to nursing school and you're in person, you're not going to be prepared to do well at that. So I want to make sure that you are prepared and you're ready to go when you go to the next step. And if you're not ready to go, it's actually better for you to take the class again than to find out later that you're not ready for the next step. So just make sure, again, no internet, no other people as resources as you're taking the exam. Okay, so what is on the exam? So I want to talk about this a little bit. So we've had a couple of modules since the second exam, and these will be on the final, and there's be about 10 to 15% of the material will be from module 12 and 13. So kind of not an insignificant amount of material. So make sure you are familiar with those modules that we've done since that second exam. For the remaining material, this will be very similar to things you have already seen, so things from the first two exams. This is not meaning that they will be identical questions, but we'll cover similar concepts. So if you had like a stoichiometry question before where you were given a balanced equation and then some amount of something, you find some amount of something else. So you probably will not have the same balanced equation, but it's the same concept. If you could do it on the first exam, you can do it on the final. So about 40 to 45% of the exam will be from each of these first two exams. And again, I know that's a lot of material, but to kind of focus this a little bit more, I will say one additional thing related to this. If it did not show up on one of the first two exams, it will not be on the final exam. Okay, so what I mean by that is in each of those modules, there's a lot of material that we covered, and then you had it on the module, and then you go to the exam. There may have been some things that we didn't talk about or didn't show up on that exam that were in those modules. Those things apparently are not if they're not important enough to be on those exams, they're certainly not important enough to be on the final exam. And then also it says about half of the material. It's probably going to be more like 40% of the material from each of the first two exams will be on the final. So not even all of those exams. So what I would tell you to do here is focus on the things from those first two exams that were the most important. So if you had a 1 or 2 point question, more than likely that will not make it to the final. But if you had a 5 or 6 point question, that probably will make it to the final. So the more highly emphasized things of the first two exams will be the things that will be focused on the most on the final exam. So you want to make sure that you know how to do those things. Know how to do the things that were highly important on the first two exams. So this is what I would recommend to prepare for the exams. Go back, the biggest thing, the most important thing, go back over your first two exams. So whatever you did on those two exams, whatever you missed, make sure you know how to do it. If you left a question blank, go back and figure out how do you do that question? How do you do a titration, for example? That was one I saw was blank on a few of the exams on the second exam. Make sure you know how to do those things. If it's a 5 or 6 point question, you're going to see that come up on the final. So make sure you know how to do them. I would go back and redo the exams would be the best thing that you can do. And maybe set aside some time for that. Maybe set aside about 75 minutes. Practice retaking each of those exams. Practice uploading if that's something that you think you need a bit more practice with. And then what I would actually recommend doing is fill those exams out, have them in front of you while you're taking the final. And when you get to that titration question, you can say, oh, this is how I did it the first time. How do I do it now? And just kind of try to transfer those same concepts over from the first or second exam to the final exam. That would be the best thing I would recommend for the final is complete those exams from before, make sure you have the right answers, and then make sure you can transfer those over. Also, the worksheets from modules 12 and 13, I would recommend doing those as well. And then again, it will be the high content areas from that will show up on the final. So make sure to kind of focus on those. And that will be a smaller amount, but not insignificant. If you completely, if you completely ace, exam one, exam two, but completely don't get anything from the end, you're still probably not getting better than a B. So if you want an A, you should make sure to master that material as well. If you want to pass the class, though, I would focus on the first two exams as the best thing to focus on in that preparation. Um, so as you're doing this, you might realize that you don't know how to answer these things. And I want to make sure you're aware of the resources you have available to do well at that. So for the final exam, there's a discussion board. Ask a question there. You can say problem number 10 on exam 2. I don't know how to do it. And I can respond to that, or someone else can respond to that. I'll probably leave a bit of space for someone else so they can get a bit of credit for that if they want to. But I will definitely try to respond to that. If it comes in Friday night before the final, I might not have the time to do that. But if you get those in earlier, I can make sure to give a kind of a thorough answer, so you're prepared for that question and then prepared for whenever that comes up on the final. I also have office hours, and specifically I will have office hours right before the final starts, right? So from 8 to 9, I have office hours right Saturday morning right before the exam starts. And that was set up when it was specifically for this class. So you can come in with questions there if you have any. And then there's also tutoring, right? So lots of options here to get those questions answered ahead of time. So hopefully it's really obvious to you what you need to know for the final by going back to the first two exams. And it's just a matter of making sure you have it figured out and you have the resources available here for doing that. So my hope is that you all do excellent on the final with this information and just taking the time to do that. So good luck, everyone, and I will see you in class.